rights. Protesters push back as southern states rush to redraw congressional districts and dilute black political power. Senator Cory Booker was among those rallying the crowd and will tell us what Democrats plan to do after the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act.
And after returning from China with little to show for his high-stakes visit, Donald Trump faces new questions about his war with Iran and his claim that Iran's military has been decimated. What the latest intelligence reports tell us. Grab your coffee and settle in, and welcome to the weekend.
Welcome to the weekend. I'm Jackie Alemany, along with Jonathan Capehart and Eugene Daniels. We begin this morning with a major election upset in the Louisiana Republican Senate primary. President Trump's influence ultimately came out on top. Two-term Senator Bill Cassidy, who voted to convict Trump in his second impeachment trial after the January 6th insurrection, and who has been a vocal critic of the Make America Healthy Again movement, failed to make the runoff in his bid to secure re-election in November. The top two finishers, Congresswoman Julia Letlow, who Trump endorsed, and Louisiana State Treasurer John Fleming have advanced to a runoff that will take place on June 27th. President Trump quickly celebrated Cassidy's loss, taking to Truth Social last night to boast. He wrote, quote, "His disloyalty to the man who got him elected is now a part of legend. And it's nice to see that his political career is over." Tell us how you really feel. After spending the last 2 weeks avoiding any criticism of Trump during the campaign, last night, Senator Cassidy took some not-so-subtle swipes at the president who cost him his re-election.
When you participate in democracy, you wanted to, but you don't pout, you don't whine, you don't claim that the election was stolen.
Well, another one down. 2 out of the 7 senators who voted to impeach Donald Trump remain: Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and the president continues to rewrite the history of January 6th.
It all goes back to that all the time.
Yeah.
I think the thing for me is these primaries are going to happen. Trump's going to weigh in. This has happened before, 2022 and 2024. But at the end of the day, the question is always candidate quality for the general, right? Like, they're not going to have issues in Louisiana, probably, these Republicans. But in other states, right, that are a little bit more purple, him dilly-dallying in the primary, Republican strategists are always much more nervous about him doing that in those states.
Well, I mean, Louisiana is red, which makes me think of Texas, which is maybe a smidge less red. But let's not forget, Senator John Cornyn is probably looking at what happened last night in Louisiana and is probably chewing his fingers down to a nub, because he is still waiting for President Trump to endorse him over Ken Paxton in the Texas Senate primary.
Yeah.
And we just saw this week Senator Cornyn saying that some highway in Texas should be renamed the President Donald J. Trump Highway. He's doing everything he can to get the president's endorsement. And if I were him, I should have, you know what? I should have saved this for my 3 things. 3 hours from now.
This was one going to be.
No, it wasn't. It's something else. I'm not going to give it away. But Senator Cornyn, give us a call. Let us know how you're feeling right now about what happened in Louisiana.
And really quickly, the loyalty, Republicans continue to forget that loyalty is a one-way street for Donald Trump. Like, even after he is losing his job, Senator Cassidy is still being, like, not going ham, not letting loose on his frustrations and behind the scenes about Donald Trump. And it's just like, guys, you lost the job. You might as well.
What's that? Say my name, say my name. What was the group?
Destiny's Child.
Destiny's Child. Come on, Senator.
Say his
Cassidy, say his name.
If we are talking about candidate quality, Paxton is no Julia Letlow, who is actually a high-quality candidate and might explain the point spread and just how well she did last night. She's someone with a compelling backstory who is a well-liked member of the House. She does not have the kind of baggage that Ken Paxton has. So
who does?
Anyways, let's go to Baton Rouge. Joining us now live with the latest, MS NOW congressional reporter Michael Schnell. Michael, what happened last night?
Yeah, Jackie, in a way, the results were surprising, but in a way, they weren't surprising at all. Surprising because we're talking about Bill Cassidy here. He's a 12-year veteran of the Senate. He's a pretty high-ranking member of the Senate Republican Conference. He is chairman of the Senate Help Committee, which has key jurisdiction over a number of key agencies. But in another way, it wasn't surprising at all. We had seen that President Trump's grip on the party was still strong in those Indiana Senate races. And there was a question of, well, was that maybe a niche issue? It was redistricting. It was something that a lot of local folks were really into. But could the same thing translate to more of a national story where the problems with the candidate were more amorphous, right? It was just that President Trump didn't like Bill Cassidy for a number of reasons. It wasn't pitted in real policy. And the voters showed last night that, yeah, that is still enough to enrage the base and to remove someone who the president's not a fan of. I mean, Julia Letlow, she is well liked among her Republican colleagues, but she still is a bit of a political newcomer, right? She only came to Congress back in 2021. John Fleming, a former member of Congress, he was the founding member of the conservative House Freedom Caucus. He has that high name ID like Bill Cassidy has. But at the end of the day, it just didn't matter. And look, we had been hearing from voters throughout the day who said that they were voting for Julia Letlow because President Trump had endorsed her. That really seems like it came down to it for a lot of folks. What I found that was most fascinating, though, was that for months, especially in the past few weeks, Bill Cassidy's been walking this extremely fine line when it came to Donald Trump, because you'd think that he's hated by Donald Trump, and he wasn't shy to say that. So he'd maybe avoid talking about the president, but instead Bill Cassidy, recognizing that Louisiana is so red, recognizing that the state went for President Trump in all three previous presidential elections, he leaned into it, saying, well, the guy may not like me personally, but we've worked together legislatively. We've gotten a lot done. At the end of the day, that policy argument just didn't matter. And as you saw in that clip you just played, it all came back to January 6th for Bill Cassidy, him saying that, you know, when you lose an election, you don't make up excuses. The tear, the rupture that began and essentially set into motion his ouster last night was that vote to convict President Trump following his insurrection. Bill Cassidy also touched on these personal attacks that have become so normalized in today's Republican politics and politics at large. He touched on that right after President Trump had unloaded on him on Truth Social. Take a listen to what he said.
I'm also asked if I am bothered by being attacked on the internet. Insults only bother me if they come from somebody of character and integrity. And I find that people of character and integrity don't spend their time attacking people on the internet.
So, guys, he may not have said the president's name, but pretty clear who he was likely talking about there. So this was sort of step 2 of 3 in this Trump revenge tour. Again, there was Bill Cassidy yesterday. Really big election coming on Tuesday as Thomas Massie, maybe President Trump's top foe among the Republican Party, faces a primary challenger that he endorsed. We'll have to see how Thomas Massie fares, but there could be more after that. It was just yesterday after Lauren Boebert had campaigned with Thomas Massie, President Trump took to Truth Social asking if anyone wanted to primary her. So Trump revenge tour, successful so far, could be continuing.
MSNOW's Michael Schnell in Louisiana for us. Thank you so much, Michael. Joining us now at the table, David Drucker, MSNOW contributor and senior writer for The Dispatch, and Don Calloway, former Missouri Democratic State Representative. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us this morning. Sir, Mr. Drucker, does this Trump winning here basically close the door on all the ideas that Democrats have wanted and some folks in the media have wanted, with Republicans standing up during the primary to Donald Trump?
I've been telling every and they get frustrated.
You're like, I'm like a broken record at this point.
Yeah, it's fine. It's your show. You're allowed to do whatever you want. Look, I've been traveling the country and I've been talking to Republican voters. They look at President Trump a lot differently than everybody else does, right? Because the polling that shows the president's numbers, like in the tank, they're legit, right? That polling is real. The reporting about sort of the outer bounds of the 2024 coalition that reelected Donald Trump, that's real. That erosion is real. But if you're a traditional Republican primary voter that's going to show up in these Republican primaries, particularly these closed primaries, right? We're talking Republicans, self-identified, and for many years, not to mention, the hardcore, self-identified MAGA voters, right? That's how they think of themselves. These people are not unhappy with Trump. They recognize that prices are high. They recognize that the war in Iran might not be something that they are in favor of necessarily. Leadership. Yeah. And when he tells them to vote against somebody, they're going to do it. And look, my reporting says when I talk to Republican primary voters, when they say when we test issues for our clients that are running in primaries, what tests higher than anything else? The Trump endorsement, or at least your ability to say that Trump and I are buddies.
Yeah, he doesn't hate me.
I mean, hands down, that's the way it is.
Yeah, yeah.
I know we're supposed to be talking about Louisiana, but David, given what you just said, I'm sitting here thinking about Senator Cornyn in Texas.
It's Cornyn territory.
Exactly. New hobby horse in addition to the used plane and Carleton College. But David, just real quickly, sure. How concerned should Senator Cornyn be that he still has not received the endorsement from President Trump?
Yeah.
Given what happened last night to Bill Cassidy.
In a word, very.
Okay.
Wait, but then how do we factor in candidate quality into this equation? How significant is that, right? Because as I was saying at the top of the show, Julia Letlow is not Ken Paxton. She is someone who's respected. She has a compelling backstory. Her husband passed away. That's why she initially took office. She's a mother. She's interesting. She's compelling.
Jackie, you made a really good point earlier. Julia Letlow is a great candidate. First of all, everybody knew that Cassidy was going to lose. Just everybody. It was a known. You talk to any Republican in Louisiana, they weren't necessarily happy about it. Not all of them. They knew he was going to lose. Julia Letlow, as you point out, great, normal Republican candidate, and that matters, right? And Ken Paxton is the most scandal-plagued candidate I may have personally ever covered.
Yeah.
But if it mattered, the guy would have been done before the runoff. And so the fact that he's ahead in a lot of polling that I have seen tells you that that's why John Cornyn should be very worried.
You keep shaking your head.
Julia Letlow
polling that I have seen tells you that that's why John Cornyn should be very worried.
You keep shaking your head.
Julia Letlow, respected member, has been a decent working member of the People's House, but you see in her victory statement or her endorsement statement about shouting out Trump's endorsement from the hilltops. That's the problem, is that decent and respectable people become immediately compromised in the wake of wanting to be Trump sycophants. If you look at John Cassidy, Cassidy, who lost, Bill Cassidy, not John Kennedy.
No, John.
Cornyn, Bill, yes.
These are committed Republicans, and I love them both because John Kennedy is a committed lawyer. He challenges the president on judiciary issues, and Cassidy has been a committed physician. He has challenged the MAHA agenda. He's challenged the president on coronavirus and now hantavirus and his procedures, which are, there is no procedure, there is no thought. The problem is that Letlow has been a decent and respected member, but what will she be now because she has had to play the sycophant and it's effectively the doormat for the Trump agenda? So what will she become now that she's had to accept this endorsement to get over the primary hump?
So Don, looking at this from the Democratic lens and seeing that Donald Trump, who, as David pointed out, his poll numbers are in the toilet.
Yes.
Disapproval ratings are through the roof. These kinds of numbers make Democrats feel real good about their chances in November. And yet, this president, who's doing all these things in addition to running up the national debt, but I digress, was still able to knock out a sitting senator who is a chairman of a committee.
Yeah.
Should Democrats be more worried than they are about November?
Tip O'Neill, all politics is local. We cannot forget the base rules. And so you're talking about a closed primary in Louisiana, like David just said. Yeah. And these are the people whose parents sent David Duke to the mat many, many times. Okay. We cannot detach ourselves from who these Republican and that is a local election, which is often detached from our bubble here in D.C. about national numbers.
And Jackie, you mentioned the number 2, but on Saturday, Tim Balk at the New York Times. Mr. Cassidy's defeat means that at most 2 of those 7 Republicans will remain in the Senate next year who voted to convict Trump. One of them, Senator Susan Collins of Maine, faces a competitive general election campaign. The other, Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, was reelected in 2022. 4 of the 7 opted for retirement over what might have been challenging reelection bids. Mr. Cassidy is the first to lose in a primary. so much of this, of what is animating the Republican Party, the fights are based in 2020, are based in January 6th. What is the forward-looking vision for the Republican Party that they're going to ask for voters' votes on in November?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great question, but I don't really think we're going to have that fight this year, right? I think the argument Republicans are going to make, and this is from my conversations with members and strategists, is that they're on and this is the terminology that's been used, we're on a rescue mission that's going to take more than 2 years to help the country recover from what happened under the Biden administration. And here's everything we did in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and we'll lay out a lot of those middle class and working class tax cuts that are in the bill in addition to everything else. And they're going to say, we need more time, give us another chance. And after redistricting, which in effect is making the House Republican majority larger when you look at the number of safe Republican or more friendly Republican seats that now exist, they're going to have at least a better chance of pulling that off in the House than they have. The Senate Republican majority remains, sort of buoyed by a favorable map, even though, as I've been reporting, it's less, Democrats are now contesting.
On that Wednesday.
I tell you right now, the redistricting stuff might help Republicans in the House, but Republicans better fear the anger among Democrats in those Senate races, because they're going to come flooding out.
And I didn't think they could get any angrier.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
You just watch. David Drucker, Don Calloway are sticking with us. When we come back, Americans mobilized yesterday against the Supreme Court's recent ruling that could erode minority voting rights. What's next as redistricting wars continue across the South? See, I got a little preview there.
Look at that.
You're watching the weekend. Bring it up again. In the aftermath of the Supreme Court ruling that dealt a crushing blow to the 1965 Voting Rights Act, Americans took to the streets across the country. Organizers say thousands gathered yesterday in Selma and Montgomery, Alabama, to protest gerrymandering and the erosion of black political power while honoring the historic 1965 civil rights marches that made the Voting Rights Act possible. Listen to what some of the protesters had to say as Republicans in southern states intensify efforts to redraw congressional maps in their favor before the midterms.
The thing that got me the other day was my aunt, who participated as a foot soldier, said, and she was in pain, and she said, Clyde, why in the world do they hate us so much? Because she participated in all of the marches, and it just sort of hurt my heart to hear her say that at 92 years old.
There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope, and our people have strong resolve. After 400 years of slavery, they still said, you know what, guys, we'll be getting out of this. So in the same vein, we'll be getting out of this. This is not the way things are not the way they will always be.
I like her optimism. David Drucker and Don Calloway are back with us. Don, I like her optimism. David Drucker and Don Calloway are back with us. Don, that soundbite from the guy, from Clyde, talking to his 92-year-old aunt.
Yeah.
And she says, why in the world do they hate us so much? I'm glad we had that soundbite because, at the end of going out of the last break, I talked about anger among Democrats. And I'm just wondering, am I wrong about that anger and the demonstrations and the things that we were hearing from out of Alabama yesterday? Will that anger show up at the voting booth in November in ways that those of us in the D.C. bubble are not anticipating?
Yeah, I expect that it will, but we have to be honest about the realities of these deep red states, is that they are not unorganized or not uninterested in voting. They are suppressed. They are intentionally and optimally suppressed, and that's been a 60-year game by the National Republican Party. We're talking about 2013, Holder versus North Shelby County, North Carolina. We're talking about the elimination of Section 2, the elimination of Section 5. We're going all the way back to a generation of adults who are seeing their manifestation of wanting to erase the voting rights gains of 1964 and 1965. So that's not something that's fixed in one election cycle because of anger. Here's what does fix it. If I could look at the camera and talk to my good fat brother, Hakeem Jeffries, you have to be willing to, once you get the gavel in January, you have to be willing, Brother Hakeem, to hold the chamber hostage to say nothing moves until we pass the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And Democrats have not been willing to burn it down ever. If he had done that 5 years ago when Nancy Pelosi had the gavel, we would not be in this position, and we would not be in a situation where Section 2 was now taken. Because remember, Section 5 was taken a few years ago.
Yeah.
Democrats have to translate voter anger into using the authority they have. Shut it down, Speaker Jeffries.
Now, that was part of the conversation we had.
When you get it, you have to tell voters what we're willing to do when we get the gavel.
And this is also the other part of the debate we were having yesterday, which is that this didn't happen in a vacuum. This has been a concerted 60-year push. But why have Democrats let that happen?
Democrats have to get, one of the things that I love about the Trump era is that it shows that Democrats are going to have to get a lot more comfortable with transactional politics. Ethical transactionality has its space in this American democracy. Republicans are naked with it and often unethical with it. Democrats believe in slow progress, and we believe in proposing a commission which will consider studying how to solve a potential problem down the road. It's got to be time out for that because people are losing rights in real time when you don't take real action.
David, that is true, and people are going to be upset, and they're going to vote. But a lot of the damage, I guess a lot of people would say, is done, right? A lot of this is baked in. And so when you talk to Republicans, are they at all worried about this backlash, or are they thinking of it in like strict political terms, as they have done successfully on this issue for such a long time?
I think they're looking at it strictly politically for the most part, in that politicians never, I say this every week, as long as it's not Tuesday yet, they don't look past this Tuesday.
Right.
So if you're a Republican looking at losing the majority, and the Supreme Court makes a decision about how you can draw districts that allows them to increase the size of their majority by a mid-decade redraw, they're going to do it.
Right.
And they're going to worry about the consequences later. I think, as a matter of strategy, one of the reasons why all of the generic balloting has Democrats in front and growing their advantage on the generic ballot is because voters are concerned about affordability and inflation and the war, and and Democrats can maximize this by focusing on that, and they need to be careful not to make promises about legislation that they cannot deliver. And with a 60-vote filibuster, you cannot deliver anything without enough bipartisan support. And if they're looking ahead to 2028, again, something politicians don't tend to do until they're there, you don't want to make promises you are not keeping, because your voters are then going to look at the next election and say, you said you were going to do this, you couldn't deliver it, why am I showing up this time? And so there's just a lot to factor in. But Republicans, it's all pure politics, but that's what you would expect from incumbents who want to keep their jobs.
Yeah. Because I've talked to a lot of Democrats, and that's where many of them are too, especially some of the strategists, where it's like, we can't make promises we can't keep. Like, we're going to get the gavel. We should say the things that we actually can get done in the House. Maybe the Senate will do its own thing, but like, say what you're going to do in the House and go from there. Otherwise, there might be a backlash on Democrats, because voters are willing to try new things, right? And that's the thing I think that 2024 should have taught everybody, is that there are a lot of black men and brown men who would have never voted for Donald Trump, but things felt so dire to them at that time. They said, you know what? Okay, well, this guy wasn't working. Let's try someone else. This woman wasn't working. Let's try something else. And that is new, I think, in politics.
I think you have to remember, one of the reasons Donald Trump was able to swipe the Republican nomination from that collection of very capable candidates in 2016, because the Republicans, from the voters' point of view, Republican voters had been making lots of promises about what they would do with their congressional majorities, and they weren't able to deliver, not on repealing the Affordable Care Act and a number of other things. And so people said, I've been voting for all the normal candidates, the candidates you told me I was supposed to vote for. You guys haven't delivered. I'll take a flyer on this guy. Right. And Democrats could end up caught up in that very same thing, just in a different way if they repeat that pattern.
Yeah. The problem is that flyer has real ramifications for real people's lives. So it's not just experimentation when you're talking about eliminating people's civil rights and liberties. And so that's why the political experimentation thing means a little bit more when you're in one of those marginalized groups.
David Jucker, former Missouri State Representative Don Calloway with a message for his frat brother. See if he sees it. Thank you both for coming to the weekend.
Let's clip it and send it.
Still to come, President Trump faces new decisions on Iran and new questions about just how effective his war of choice has been. You're watching The Weekend, only on MS Now. From his trip to China with nothing to show for it, President Trump faces new decisions in the war with Iran. Pakistan's Interior Minister visited Tehran yesterday to discuss specific agreements and negotiations to end the war. This all comes as a leader in Iran's parliament said new plans for traffic in the Strait of Hormuz would be, quote, unveiled soon. Meanwhile, with the war now in its third month, with no end in sight, the New York Times reports some top aides have drafted plans for a return to military strikes as negotiations stall. And there are new signs Trump's war of choice isn't living up to the administration's claims. It's building. A U.S. official confirmed to MS Now that about 70% of Iran's mobile missile launchers remain viable. And Iran has also retained roughly 70% of its pre-war missile stockpile. To get into all this, John Brennan, the former CIA director and MS Now senior national security intelligence analyst. Director Brennan, thank you as always for coming to the weekend. To that last point, let's play Trump's admin's.
Missiles are mostly decimated. They have probably 19%, but not a lot by comparison to what they had.
Their missile launching capability has been substantially degraded.
Their ability to launch missiles and drones is dramatically curtailed. They have some missiles, but not very many. I think we're in very good shape.
Their missile program is functionally destroyed. Launchers, production facilities, and existing stockpiles depleted and decimated.
Their communications are gone. Missiles are gone. Launches are gone.
Now, I'm not good at math, nor have I ever been to war. However, I think 18 to 19% is a lot different than what we actually know based on the reporting, which is 70% of the missile launchers are still viable. 70% of the pre-war missile stockpile still there. How dangerous is it for the administration to run around saying things like this when the intel tells a completely different story?
I think it's always dangerous when the President of the United States misleads the public and lies about things like this, particularly, as you said, during war. It's clear that their comments are inconsistent with all the reporting that's come out about the intelligence community assessments that determined that still Iran has a large portion of its missile capabilities and inventory. It also is inconsistent with the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is closed down. Because if, in fact, the Iranians' inventory was depleted as much as they say, I don't think we'd have the same concerns as far as the traffic that's coming through the Strait of Hormuz. It's not just the fast boats. The fast boats, I think they feel that they can take care of, but it's the missile capability that the Iranians still have along the coast that lines the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. Well, speaking on that point, our colleague David Broad on Wednesday reported on intel on the Strait of Hormuz missiles. The recent intelligence reports found Iran has restored access to 30 American warships and oil tankers transiting the strategic waterway. Director Brennan, this is a war that the president started at 2 in the morning via video on a Saturday, but I digress, and seems unwilling to take all the off-ramps that have been offered to him. Is there an off-ramp that the administration can take or should take to end a conflict that is not only jacking up gas prices in the United States, but is leading to oil shortages in Europe and in Asia?
Well, as you pointed out, this was a senseless, unnecessary war that he decided to go forward on. Yes, I do believe that there are some off-ramps here, but Donald Trump is exceptionally stubborn, and he is unwilling to say that this was a mistake. And he's not going to say it was a mistake. But right now you have the economic blockade, basically, of Iranian ports that the Iranians want to have lifted. You have the basic blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. And so there needs to be some type of equivalency here as far as we can make some concessions as far as allowing the Iranians to be able to import and export some goods through their ports. And the Iranians then can say, okay, we're going to relax our stranglehold over the Strait of Hormuz. But it's the economics elements of this. The Iranians are not going to capitulate, even if we start bombing again. They've shown tremendous resilience, and they still have tremendous capability. But it's the economic front, both in terms of the impact on the global economy, that needs to be relaxed somehow. But the Iranians are not going to do that as long as the United States continues to maintain the blockade on their ports. So when the United States continues to maintain the blockade on their ports. So when Donald Trump announced, well, the Strait of Hormuz is going to be open and the blockade is going to continue, as soon as I saw that we were going to maintain that blockade without any concessions whatsoever on that economic front for Iran, I knew the Iranians were not going to concede an opening on the Strait of Hormuz because it's not going to happen.
And meanwhile, despite the mess in Iran, you have senior Trump administration officials focused on Cuba. The AP reported this week that they are preparing to seek an indictment against Raul Castro. And you had CIA Director John Ratcliffe, who went and actually met with Cuban officials in Havana this week at the request. This was a meeting that happened at the request of the United States. I had some administration officials complaining to me about now Cuba getting thrown into the mix amid already this sort of politically fraught moment with Iran. What do you think the administration is trying to do here? I mean, is this an inevitable outcome of what happened in Venezuela because Cuba is now drying up? They've had a blackout for a record number of weeks now with people unable to just sort of live any sort of normal daily life?
Well, yes, I think an objective of the Trump administration has been for quite a while that they want to have regime change in Cuba. And Marco Rubio is certainly behind that. And so the Venezuela option was, replacing the senior leader there, Maduro, getting him out, but be able to exploit the situation in Venezuela for U.S. or Trump administration economic benefit. I think they'd like to do the same thing with Havana. They'd like to be able to get the current regime out, but they would like to be able to return Cuba to the days of the 1950s, when in fact you had the casinos and the mobs and other types of things that are there. And they're using economic leverage in terms of the failure of Cuba to be able to import oil, but also these threats of taking legal action against Raul Castro, who's 90 years old or something, for the shoot down of the planes over 25 years ago. So I think this is going to be a concerted effort on the part of the Trump administration officials to try to put as much pressure as they can on the officials in Cuba in order to seek that regime change.
John Brennan is sticking with us. Coming up, how Trump's DOJ continues to target his critics as the administration reportedly wants to create a fund for alleged victims of weaponization. You're watching The Weekend.
مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على الحبيب الذي أجاءنا هدى يا رب بالنور أكرم مهجتي واغفر ذنوبي وهون كربتي أنت الرجاء إذا ضاقت بنا الدنيا وبذكرك العالي تحيا روحنا الله الله يا مولانا أنت الرحيم وأنت هادينا الله يا رحمن بنورك اجعل قلوبنا إيمان صلوا على طه الرسول محمد خير البرية والنور المؤيد من بالصلاة عليه نال راحة والقلب من أنواره يتجدد يا ربنا اجعلنا على درب الهدى واختم بالخيرات أعمارنا مدى مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على الحبيب المصطفى